Om Shanti. Welcome to Midday Meditation. I've been talking this week about the intellect, which is a part of consciousness. We're very aware of the mind, the part of consciousness which isn't so easy to control. And we're especially aware of the mind when it goes in directions we don't like and we're not sure what to do. How do we get it back on the right track? And the answer is that the intellect is the part of consciousness that has the ability to manage the mind and also the responsibility to manage the mind. So we want to really understand the intellect and also strengthen the intellect. And we said yesterday, the way you strengthen the intellect, just like the way you strengthen the body, good nutrition and exercise. When we meditate, that's exercise. It's both actually. It's good nutrition for the intellect and it's also exercise for the intellect. And when people talk about inner strength, they're talking about the intellect, having a strong intellect, an intellect that is clear about my own values, my own principles, my own inner sense of what's right and not right. An intellect that's very clear about that. And an intellect that is vigilant also, that's watching the mind and questioning what comes on the screen of the mind. Is this true? Is this relevant? Is this appropriate? And also an intellect that can step in when the ego gets very strong. The ego can actually override the intellect if the intellect is weak. So sometimes if you have children, the child might say, the other kids are making fun of me, or the kids are bullying me, or something like that. And the parent has to tell the child, you got to stand up for yourself. I understand what you're saying, but I can't be with you all the time. You have to have techniques to take care of yourself. And so the intellect is this way also. The intellect has to be strong. The intellect can be, the ego can sometimes be like a bully. The ego can be forceful. The intellect is never forceful, but very strong in truth. This is my own inner truth, and very clear about what brings me into a place of wellness and happiness and what doesn't. So the intellect has to be able to do all of that. Now, if the intellect were always strong, the mind would always be very good and we would always be very happy. But the reality is that we've all, along the course of life, developed some bad habits. And we don't want those bad habits. We really want to change. We want to reform ourselves. But it takes a strong intellect. And it takes an intellect that is connected with the higher self, which is my own goodness. Because otherwise, the intellect can draw upon the strength of the ego. And then it becomes forceful strength, which we don't want. Strength of the intellect is the strength of peace, the strength of love. And then the intellect can guide the mind. When these thoughts come up, when the mind is being taken over by a bad habit, or the ego is promoting a bad habit, the intellect can be very peaceful, very loving, and say, no, not in my kingdom. We don't behave this way. We don't even think this way in my kingdom. This is not aligned with my own truth. So this is how the intellect guides us in reforming the self. And it's not that you're changing yourself, but it's bringing ourselves back to that original state of purity, which we've lost on the course of life, but we have good intellects, and so we can get it back again. And this is what we'll practice together today. Using the intellect to reform. To begin with, take a few deep, full, easy breaths. Watch the air enter and leave the lungs. Notice how quiet and gentle the breath is. And as we watch the breath, the intellect is watching the breath and allowing the qualities of the breath to influence the mind. So maybe my mind was working really fast, if I'm at work especially. When you're at work, the mind has to go fast. And maybe the ego was promoting a little bit of fear in my mind over one thing or another. So now the intellect is going to reform. We have to constantly reform all day long because the mind constantly goes in the wrong direction. So the intellect reforms. Watch the breath. Notice how quiet and gentle the breath is. Use it as a model and let the mind move into stillness and become more silent. When the intellect has practice reforming the mind, it can do it very easily. And yes, we have to do it constantly, but over time, the mind becomes reformed. The way that we think changes. We become more peaceful, more tolerant over time. If we allow the intellect to reform our thinking. Now, the intellect also, another form of exercise for the intellect is to choose high quality thoughts, elevated thoughts, and put those thoughts on the screen of the mind. I am the peaceful soul who lives in this body. I am invisible. I'm the one who thinks, and I'm the one who remembers, and I'm the one who reacts. All of these things consciousness does. And the intellect is the wise and benevolent manager of consciousness. So, just as you often in your job, you'll start the day with a team meeting and talk about what are we going to do today? Who's going to do what? How can we accomplish the tasks that we've been given? The intellect can take that same role of the team leader. What do we need to do today? We need to be peaceful. We need to be loving. We need to have a lot of happiness. We need to feel successful. We need to feel like we've cooperated with others, shared with others. We need to be in the flow of love. All of these qualities are the job of the intellect. So while we're getting the work done and we're doing our chores and everything else with the body, the intellect is also adding this spiritual dimension, which is what makes life worthwhile. We're not robots. I am the peaceful soul who lives in this body. Let the energy of peace flow. Because when I'm peaceful inside, the intellect can function very well. When I'm peaceful inside, the ego is quiet, not threatened. I'm a peaceful soul, and I fill myself with the energy of peace. The intellect also knows that if we're going to be stable and productive and light, we have to use the quality of love. The higher self does everything from a place of love. Love is natural, it's a free flowing energy for the higher self. And so the intellect knows about the ego, and the intellect knows that if there isn't any love, the ego will raise his head of fear. So lots of love so the ego can be quiet. Go deeply within once again. Touch that place of love. Let the energy of love flow. I am a being of love. I, the soul, have lots of love for myself. I'm a spiritual being, a divine being. I have a unique part to play in this big drama. I get my own part. Nobody can take my part away from me. It's mine. And I have my own qualities. Nobody can take my qualities away. The more I use them, the stronger they become. So I have love for myself, love for my life, love for all of the other actors in my drama, love for the earth. The intellect fills the mind with love because this is a way that the intellect reforms. If there isn't the presence of love, the mind will start downsliding and find something that's wrong or something to complain about or something to criticize if it's not filled with love. But when the mind is full of love, same old world, same old me, but I'm okay with everything the way that it is. There's no need to criticize or complain. It doesn't get me anywhere. It doesn't help anything. So I know, but I don't have thoughts. Instead, I have thoughts of love. I see what is succeeding. And where there are struggles, I give positive energy, good wishes. I use my good qualities. This is how the intellect gets strong. I think we all have some habit of thinking that takes us into negativity, brings us down. We don't like this habit. We'd rather not have it. And so we'll do a little experiment with using the intellect today. Think of one habit of thinking, maybe one topic that you are critical of, or you complain about, or you don't like, or you avoid, or you resist. Think of one thing like that that brings you down in your life. And now let the intellect come in and bring a virtue that you can activate to reduce the power of that negative thought. What virtue could I really use so that I don't get pulled down? This is something about my life. It's there, but I don't want to get pulled down by it. So, what virtue would help? And then have the intellect invoke that virtue and fill yourself with the experience of that virtue. And now see yourself connected with the supreme source of goodness. And when we invoke virtues within ourselves, we're also invoking help from God, because that's how God helps the one who has all virtues. See yourself now receiving light, the light of all virtues from the Supreme Soul. You, the tiny being of light, connected with the source of spiritual light. And see yourself receiving the light of all virtues. This also strengthens the intellect, connecting with the source, connecting with pure energy. Keep filling yourself with that divine light. And as we do that, the old habit becomes weaker. Maybe not noticeably weaker, but over time, this is how the intellect reforms. Over time, when we do this repeatedly, the old habit gets weaker and weaker and weaker, and eventually it just disappears. The intellect has to be vigilant. It can't give up. Because if the intellect gets weak, then the ego gets strong. When the intellect invokes divine light, the ego gets weaker. Now bring your awareness very slowly and gently back into the body that you inhabit. And the present moment. And the day ahead of you. And hold in your awareness that you don't have to just endure bad habits because you have a very good intellect. And the intellect can reform the character. The intellect can strengthen new habits, and then the old habits become weak. And so when the intellect is connected with the higher self, filled with peace, filled with love, then the intellect can reform any bad habit. There's no habit that is stronger than the power of the intellect. Om Shanti. Now for our blessing for today. There's the card. And the blessing says, you radiate with the beauty of a peaceful mind and a healthy heart. You radiate with the beauty of a peaceful mind and a healthy heart. So Sheila, you can send this thought to your husband. You give him this blessing, okay? You give him the blessing that you radiate with the beauty of a beautiful mind, a peaceful mind, and a healthy heart.
Thank you.
Om Shanti. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti.
So can you send me the recording, no Shaba?
Sure.
Thank you.